When I was a boy, I lived in a town in Ohio, and often I wandered away to lie upon my back, thinking.
There was all of this starved side of American small-town life. Perhaps I was even vain enough to think that these stories told would in the end have the effect of breaking down a little the curious separateness of so much of life. These walls that we build up around us. The ordinary beliefs of people about me, that love lasted indefinitely, that success meant happiness, simply did not seem true to me. In my stories, I simply stayed at home among my own people. Winesburg, of course, was no particular town. It was a mythical town. I had got the characters of the book from everywhere about me, in towns in which I had lived, in the army, in factories and offices.
These words were written by novelist Sherwood Anderson more than 50 years ago. But if Winesburg is a fictional town, this town then is real. Clyde, Ohio, population 5,500, is considered by most authorities as the setting for Winesburg, Ohio, a novel that demolished the myth of the small town in America. Young Sherwood Anderson spent most of his impressionable years in this small rural town before the turn of the century. It was here that he sensed the frustration, the isolation, the inarticulateness of human lives. It was here that he first began to realize the falsehood of the great American dream. Anderson considered himself a storyteller, and people from towns such as Clyde provided the inspiration for his perceptive mind. This town served as a model for his fictitious settings. This is Clyde today. It's about twice as large as when Sherwood Anderson lived here. Clyde may be considered typical of the small towns that dot the length and breadth of America. But if Clyde is typical, it is also unique. Located in the flat, lush, fertile farmlands of northwestern Ohio, Clyde has had more than its fair share of local heroes, Sherwood Anderson notwithstanding. Perhaps part of a town story can best be told here, in this scrupulously kept cemetery, where all human hope and passion repose quietly under an autumn sky. This monument honors one of Clyde's most famous sons, Civil War Major General James B. McPherson. Captain Charles McCleary, Medal of Honor winner from that same war, lies buried here too. Over there, on the knoll, is the grave of Seaman George Burton Meek. He was the first American enlisted man to die during the Spanish-American War. Here, in the newer part of the cemetery, is the grave of yet another Clyde boy who died in the service of his country. Roger Young was awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor for his actions at New Georgia Island during World War II. There are other graves here of other men and boys who died in other wars. But most who are buried here did not achieve fame and glory. They were simply people. They, like millions of their counterparts, were the people Sherwood Anderson wrote about. Perhaps Clyde's immortality was achieved through Anderson. Perhaps the town itself, Clyde or Winesburg, is his living memorial. The people he knew, the places he wrote about. But there is this grave, the grave of his mother, Emma. Anderson's book is dedicated to her, whose observation on the life about her
first awoke in me the hunger to see beneath the surface of lives. I should like to take you with me through the gate into the land. Let you wander there with me. Tales are everywhere. Every man, woman, and child you meet on the street has a tale for you.
When the Anderson family moved to Clyde in 1884, Main Street was much different. Clyde was a raw frontier railroad town barely out of adolescence. Main Street was a dirt track, choking with dust in the hot, dry summer, a ribbon of clinging mud in the fall and spring, and frozen iron hard in the winter. Because it was a railroad town, many of the first buildings were hastily constructed to accommodate the sudden newfound wealth. In the 1870s, fire destroyed many of these early buildings. Anderson, as a youngster, witnessed the evolution of Main Street into what it is today.
There were always horses tied to the hitching posts along the main street of our town. There were old horses with sad eyes and worn-out geldings. There were horse races in our main street on winter afternoons, the street cleared for them. Now, Main Street was to be paved like a sidewalk, while a sewer was to be laid down, and the little outhouses in the backyards were to go. But forward with American progress.
Yet today, much remains of Anderson's and Weinsberg's time. Oh, you won't find Meyerbaum's Notion Store, Win Pawsey's Shoe Store, Tom Hearn's Grocery, or Tom Willie's Saloon on this street. These names, sometime with slight modifications, existed only in Anderson's fertile imagination. Yet, this is the street Anderson had in mind when he wrote Weinsberg. Over there, for instance, is where Abner Groff's bakery stood. Today, it is still a bakery, only the name is different. West's drugstore is there, a few doors away. And just up the block was the site of the Weinsberg Eagle, where Anderson's young protagonist, George Willard, worked. Hearn's Grocery stood here on the site where Thad Hurd and his son Herman ran the store for 2 generations. Except for some modern facelifting on the lower stories, Main Street is much the same as it was in Anderson's day. True, incandescent lights have replaced the gas lights, and neon signs fight for your attention, and the mud was replaced by asphalt, and high-tension wires crisscross the street. But the modern-day Clyde resident has only to raise his eyes slightly upward to find tangible reminders of the 19th century. Silhouetted against a bright sky, the upper stories of Clyde's Main Street remained virtually untouched since they were built nearly 100 years ago. Many of the windows are boarded up now, and most of the upper floors are unoccupied because of today's rigid fire standards. In their day, they played an important role in the activities of Main Street. Lodge groups met in these upper floors, and over there, where those boarded windows stare bleakly, is where the volunteers for the Spanish-American War drilled 5 nights a week. Except for the 2 huge doors, City Hall stands as it was built, mute evidence of Clyde's early architecture. Main Street was, and still is to a certain extent, the economic artery of Clyde. While main streets across the country are suffering from economic blight and extinction with the advent of the modern shopping center, Clyde Street has yet to feel the full impact of these modern phenomena. This street is still sufficient for the needs of most Clyde residents. Anderson, who was ever skeptical of so-called technological progress, would probably approve.
How can they torture us in this manner?
Oh, you cursed Yankees. What's the matter with you?
Sir, in the name of heaven and humanity, give us something to eat.
I have something better to do than feeding.
No actor has trod the boards of this stage for more than 60 years. No audience has thrilled to the words of Shakespeare nor been held spellbound by the melodramatic scenes of The Spy of Atlanta. At the time Anderson lived here, there were 2 such opera houses. There is only one now, and time has taken its toll. This one, Terry's Hall, is the only surviving remnant of Clyde's early cultural world. Here, for a few brief hours, people could be lifted from the routine of their own lives and transported to the world of mystery, intrigue, fantasy, and comedy and tragedy. In one of Anderson's Weinsberg tales, an older woman looks back to her girlhood with longing and regret. Like most young girls of her day and today, Elizabeth Willard was enthralled by the pageantry and glamour of the stage. To Elizabeth Willard, the stage offered escape from the suffocating isolation and the rigid moral code of the small town. One can easily envision the young, vibrant girl seated here, perhaps completely enraptured by the pageantry of the performance being enacted before her. Here, she thought, was the threshold to the world, a world beyond the narrow limits of the small Ohio farm community. Perhaps, she thought, there was more to life than marriage and rearing children and caring for a husband and home. Perhaps this world offered the opportunity for the girl to share something of herself with all mankind. Later on, of course, the girl learned that it was impossible for her to escape. The traveling actors themselves told her that the world of the theater, like the real world, could be dull and uninteresting and confining. So perhaps life's greater tragedies are not played on a stage such as this. Perhaps Anderson was right in his theory that the truest tragedies of life are acted against the dull routine of daily living and existence.
Your wife would no doubt be glad to see you in your present condition.
These are ghostly voices echoing from the past. Every small town of importance had its opera house, but it too has disappeared with the passage of time.
As I remembered it, the town of Clyde itself was a fair and sweet town. There were many little white frame houses. All the residence streets were lined with great spreading maples. And at the back of his yard, every citizen with any pretensions had a barn. For what seems to him long years, a child's life goes on in a single street of his town. I am back now in the little street, the first of the American small town streets that were to stay always so sharply in my mind. Our small yellow house at the foot of its street by the cattail swamp had been supplied with water from the spring at the base of the beech tree that stood at the edge of our tiny front yard. There was a barrel sunk in the ground, and once we had a terrible accident with the spring. A small child drowned.
The spring was filled in shortly after the tragic accident described by Anderson. The Anderson home, where he spent much of his youth, is this neatly kept home at 129 Spring Avenue. It has changed hands many times since the Anderson family rented it, and it has been altered too. That garage was added a few years back.
There were families in the town who lived in larger and more comfortable houses. The rooms of such houses were all warm in the winter. There was a great base burner in what was called the front room. In the parlor, there was an enlarged portrait of the head of the house, merchant, a lawyer, a doctor, or a retired farmer. Houses are like people. The houses have faces. The windows are eyes. Some houses smile at you, others frown. There are some houses that are always dark. People in them crawl off early to bed. You hear no laughter from such houses. No one sings. Other houses are proud. I know houses that always seem to be whispering to me. There are secrets hidden in each house. Odd things happen to people behind the walls of houses. Many people are one thing inside their houses and another on the street. There are evenings when I walk and see houses that all seem to be talking to me. They are trying to tell me what I cannot understand. The man who loves life and people shows it in the way he walks along the street. His house would tell us his secret if we could only understand. You cannot think far into other lives without becoming intensely humble.
This church is probably the one Anderson had in mind when he wrote his sharply edged story of the moral struggle of a man at midlife who is torn between the rigid teachings of his religious faith and the cravings of his own flesh. From that tower, the Reverend Curtis Hartman peered longingly at the body of the young school teacher, Kate Swift. In the small bell tower office with its stained-glassed window, the Reverend Hartman prayed for the strength of God to deliver him from temptation. Reverend Hartman was unsuccessful in his struggle. Clyde's Presbyterian Church served as a model for Anderson's story. There are enough similarities to make the theory plausible. Like Anderson's fictional church, this one has an office in the bell tower. In the Weinsberg tale, the minister could clearly see into the bedroom of the young school teacher. When Weinsberg was published, the people of Clyde were quite naturally upset by this story and others in the book. Once the novel gained notoriety, it became obvious to the world that Clyde was the real Weinsberg. It was stories such as this that shocked the reading public of the times, for Weinsberg introduced a note of new frankness to American literature.
Well, it was published, and immediately there was a strange reaction, a strange reception. In justice, I ought to speak of the fact that criticism had been poured over all my contemporaries from the start. We had the notion that sex had something to do with people's lives, and it had barely been mentioned in American writing before our time. No one, it seemed, ever used a profane word. And for bringing sex back to take what seemed to us its normal place in the picture of life, we were called sex-obsessed. And the people of the actual Weinsberg protested. They declared the book immoral, and that the actual inhabitants of the real Weinsberg were highly moral people. Certainly the people of my book, who had lived their little fragments of lives in my imagination, were not especially immoral. They were just people. Surely I myself might well be blamed, condemned for not having the strength or skill in myself to give them a more vital and a truer life. But that they should be called people not fit to be written about filled me with horror.
Of course, the fury has long since passed the way, and the book that was widely damned, that was called nasty and dirty by most of its critics, has become a classic staple in university literature courses across the country. In Anderson's novel, the county fair played a prominent part in the social activities of the community. The fair offered the last opportunity for people to meet and chat with their neighbors before the isolation of the long, dark, and bitter Ohio winter. Old-timers hereabouts say the fairgoers used to park their buggies and their rigs over there under that beautiful stand of oak trees in the infield. Anderson was a lover of horses and horse racing. Comments about the sport nostalgically appear and reappear throughout much of his writing.
The life of the sporting fraternity had color, and the horses themselves, beautiful, temperamental things, fascinated me. There was the boy, myself, hanging over the low fence in the infield by the judge's stand. How his heart beat. There was something in the sustained rhythmic swing of the legs and bodies of the horses, going a speed that touched some secret hunger in him.
The fairgrounds plays a poignant part in Anderson's novel. It is here, in the setting of a country fair, that young George Willard realizes the frailty and mortality of man. Only a vestige of the fairground remains. Anderson has been dead for more than 30 years now. Ironically, George Willard achieved immortality through the pages of Weinsberg, Ohio. But if the fairgrounds is abandoned and nearly forgotten, the waterworks pond is still very much a going concern. Officially, the area, a short walk from the fairgrounds, is called Clyde Recreational Park. But to most residents, it is still Waterworks Pond. As it was in Anderson's day, the creek and pond are favorite haunts of youngsters. It's a choice spot for young lovers, too. This is a place where two young people can discover the mystery of life and the true relationship of a man and a woman that transcends the impatience of youthful passion. This idyllic site offers the opportunity for those who will take it to discover those deep personal feelings that can be reflected in another. George Willard and Helen White came to Waterworks Pond and for a brief moment found peace and contentment. Little has changed since Anderson's time. Undoubtedly, future couples will stroll contentedly side by side through this lonely, lovely glade.
There was something strange happening to our town that must have been happening at about the same time to thousands of American towns. A sudden and almost universal turning of men from the old handicrafts toward our modern life of machines. I was to see it happen. I was to be a part of it. It meant the end of the old craftsmen of the town, the shoemakers, the harness, wagon, buggy, furniture, and clothing makers. All the little shops scattered through the town, shops in which men fashion things with their hands directly of the raw materials furnished by nature, were to disappear with amazing rapidity. There was a kind of blind faith in what we were all doing, a belief that the machine would solve an old problem for men, lifting the load of heavy, brutal toil off man's shoulders, making a new life of ease and comfort for all. This, however, all mingled with a feeling of doubt and fear among the older men of the town. This feeling of change was in our own little house. It was in all the houses along our streets. It was in all of the houses in every street of every town. Men proclaimed it while others protested it. It ran all through our Middle West. If Winesburg, Ohio, tried to tell the story of the defeated people of an old American individualistic small-town life, then my later books have been an attempt to carry these people forward into a new American life, into the whirl and roar of modern machines. I do not believe that my own impulses have changed.
Most Americans were enamored and greeted the advent of the new machine era with lusty enthusiasm. Words such as hustle, progress, change, speculation captured the minds and the imagination of the American people. Yet there were nagging doubts in the minds of some who foresaw the end of the simple, uncomplicated life. Some, like Sherwood Anderson, sensed that a natural zest for life was disappearing with frightening speed. The rusting, abandoned rail junction was the heart of Winesburg at the time of Anderson's novel. It was the heart of Clyde, too. One can only imagine how many little personal dramas were enacted here. In Anderson's youth, all the life, all the color, all the excitement of a 19th century town happened right here, where the tracks of two railroads cross. All is gone now, victim of modern transportation. Ironically, the site is a town parking lot. It has been nearly 30 years since the last passenger train rolled to a stop before the L-shaped station. At its peak, Clyde boasted of 16 passenger trains a day. It was a changing point for all north-south, east-west passengers. The old Victorian-style station was torn down a decade ago, and the rail ties are rotting away. In a few years, they too will probably disappear. Anderson recalled this spot later in life.
There was the little strip of lawn by the railroad station in our town. Two railroads, one running east and west, the other north and south, crossed at our railroad station. They made common use of the same building, the same telegraph operator, ticket agent, express and baggage masters. The little strip of lawn beside the north and southbound tracks had as a backdrop the walls of an old flour mill and grain elevator. And there was always a few empty freight cars on a railroad siding along the walls of the building. As in all American towns of the times, the railroad station was the magnet that continually drew our people. There was a passenger train going away into the mysterious West at some 20 minutes after 7 in the evenings. And as 6 o'clock was our universal supper hour, we all congregated at the station to see the train arrive and depart. We boys gathering far down the station platform to gape with hungry eyes at the locomotive.
Clyde's train station was one of the locations continually referred to by Anderson. It was the core, the center of social life. Clustered about the station, as if to gain economic strength, were 3 hotels and several small restaurants. Competition for the passenger dollar was sharp. Most of the hotels have disappeared. Over there, where that new building stands, is the site of the Empire House, later the Wayside Inn. This is thought to be the model for Anderson's New Willard House. This area, once the strong current of the community, has become a backwater now. It is a bit sad to know that no young George Willard can ever again leave from this junction to seek his fortune in the cities of the world. George Willard and Sherwood Anderson left Clyde from this spot. Both found an immortality that comes to few men. In some ways, the creator and the created became one. Yet Anderson never forgot that his roots were deeply embedded in this small Ohio town. Perhaps Winesburg is the ultimate tribute he can pay to the scene of his youth.